The future is here. Flying cars, robot butlers, and of course, space travel. But what does one do to fill their time between all of this galactic heroing and driving their car down the highways of the future? Where do you ride your Wedway people mover to at the end of the day to relax, kick your feet up, and say, boy, the future sure is futuristic? Where else but a home made entirely out of plastic, built near Fantasyland at Disneyland? Where else but a dream home set inside a former Carousel of Progress show building? Where else but Disney's Homes of the Future, where the three greatest minds of our time, MIT, Walt Disney Imagineering, and Monsanto, came together for the very first time to create a very plus-looking house where guests of all ages could experience and really feel like they were living in the future. From concept that offered little to no privacy in the middle of the happiest place on Earth to construction, operation, and of course the eventual disastrous demolition. Join me as we journey both back in history and forward to the future to examine the history, fate, and maybe potential future of Disneyland's Monsanto House of the Future. So we all know the deal with Disneyland's Tomorrowland at this point, right? I don't need to go over it again. It needs help. We all know it needs help. Let's move on. Yeah, it's always sort of been like that, except for 1966. That was beautiful. But unlike today, where we're all obsessed with a returning people mover and a renewable future, back then everyone's minds were on a different topic. Not solar power, not nuclear power. Well, yes, nuclear power, but also plastic. Folks in the 1950s were going absolutely insane for plastic.
And the molded urea covers on your cosmetic jars are those squeezable spray bottles made of polyethylene. Your refrigerator is full of plastics, too.
My refrigerator?
Both inside and out. It's full of plastics no matter what make you have. And the extruded vinyl door gasket helps to keep the cold inside. You probably have those flexible ice cube trays made of plastic. And the popular new styrene food containers for perishables. Water coolers, fruit juice containers, and special bottle caps.
Aren't some bottle caps made of metal?
Yes.
Trust me.
Plastic.
Is in.
Plastic.
Is hot. I want some.
Plastic. Plastic.
It's gonna be.
It was all about plastic back then. You couldn't kick a plastic can down your plastic street without hitting another piece of plastic. Have I said it enough times? Plastic, 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 it was everywhere! And what were the 50s all about besides, you know, the obvious? That's right, cities of the future, futurism, and building communities of tomorrow. Walt Disney himself, said it best.
Right now our plans include an airport of the future down here in Osceola County. An entrance complex where all visitors will enter Disney World. An industrial park area covering about 1,000 acres. And of course, the theme park area way up here. And all these varied activities around the Disney World will be tied together by a high-speed, rapid transit system running almost the full length of the property. But the most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow. We call it Epcot.
Oh, don't talk to me about Epcot, Walt. I know all about that. So what do you get when you combine urban and household planning with the wonders of plastic? You get the Disneyland Monsanto House of the Future, otherwise known as if the 1950s sense of futurism were an attraction at Disneyland. On a completely unrelated note, Star Tours. Who needs it? I sure don't. How about we go ahead and replace it with what came before? No, not that one, although that's not a bad idea. Nope, not that either, although I can understand the appeal of a nice cold glass of milk on a hot Anaheim summer's day. There we go, the Monsanto Hall of Chemistry. It's essentially one of those chemistry sets you would buy at Target, except if it were a Disneyland attraction. And by attraction, I mean exhibit? Not a ride, and may I say, not as good as the Kaiser Aluminum Hall of Fame. That one's got an aluminum pig in it. Huh. Turns out Disneyland's never been good. So from the opening day of Disneyland in 1955, Disney and Monsanto were kind of bonded at the hip. There was a lot of chemistry there. They got together periodically. Okay, I'm done. So when Monsanto began to develop this plastic house of the future, they decided to put it on display at Disneyland because they had already, had a bunch of chemistry with that. Okay, now I'm done. Now, even though that was the same pun I made earlier, the partnership made sense and Disney gave Monsanto the okay to go ahead and build the House of the Future near Fantasyland and Tomorrowland sort of mixing point. Ah, the Fantasyland Tomorrowland mixing point. Home of pixies, yetis, and cars, and monorails. It's interesting, don't ask. I still love it. Specifically though, we're talking about Pixie Hollow, where nowadays you can meet Tinkerbell and some of her fairy friends, I think. I've never been in there. Because it rests on the former site of the House of the Future. You can even see some remnants of it while you're in the line to meet Tinkerbell, but we're gonna hold off on that for a second. In June of 1957, the house finally opened, and with how big plastic was at the time, of course, as we've talked about, it was a smash hit. Everyone wanted to know how they'd be toasting their toast and chilling their beverages in the far-flung future of 1980, maybe 1990. I can speak from personal experience, being from the future and all, that it's very similar to the way they had it back then. But don't take my word for it, listen to this guy from the 50s.
And what a kitchen. If you want more light, press a button. Any intensity of light through polarized plastic ceiling panels. Soft light, shadowless light. A dishwasher, of course, but this one unlike any other. Washing is by ultrasonic waves. And the dishwasher is also the storage place for dishes. Plastic dishes, of course.
Of course.
Yes, living here could be fun, even to setting the table. What's happening here? In an ordinary house, we'd be talking about the refrigerator and freezer. But in this House of the Future, we call them cold zones. 3 of them, each lowered to handy position at the touch of a button. One zone for regular refrigeration, one for frozen, and one for irradiated food.
Wait, one for what? Food irradiation is the process of exposing food and food packaging to ionizing radiation such as from gamma rays, X-rays, or electron beams. What? Turns out I'm the dumb one here. The house was a success, drawing in over 435,000 visitors in the first 6 weeks and over 20 million visitors before being closed 10 years later. For a walk-through attraction, that's not too bad. But more so than being a brand new attraction at Disneyland, it was sort of this new icon for Tomorrowland and the park as a whole. You know how like the Tower of Terror at Hollywood Studios was never intended to be the icon? It was the Eiffel Tower in the Chinese theater. They kind of shared it. And then they made it the hat, which was, fine. And then now it's the Hollywood Tower Hotel, even though the Chinese theater should be the icon, because it's at the end of the main street. But what do I know? I don't have a degree in marketing. The House of the Future was more than just a walk-through attraction. It was becoming an icon of the future, retrofuturism as we know now, but back then I assume it's just futurism. But the problem with the future is, as we all know, repeat after me, attractions based on real-world technology and innovations don't hold up over time because the imaginary future from the attraction eventually arrives. All the same. Yeah, see, we all know that by heart. The House of the Future, of course, had the Tomorrowland problem being part of Tomorrowland and Disneyland. That's just a recipe for disaster. Although this was the first Disneyland attraction with smellitzers, essentially a primitive form of smellitzers. So you get bonus points for that. You could not only adjust the temperature in each room individually, you could also adjust the smell. Yeah. And although as we entered the 60s, the attraction did become part of that Tomorrowland problem, it was okay, because they were self-deprecating about it.
Those of you who have visited us previously know that many of the exciting uses of plastics you saw here before now have become commonplace in houses from New England to California.
Yes, this isn't really the House of the Future anymore. It's now more of a house of the moderately wealthy, a family who's obsessed with plastic.
And aside from some cosmetic updates to keep it up to date with the interior styles of the day, there wasn't really tech being cycled in and out of this house. It's essentially sort of stuck where it was on opening day. And so after 10 years, it was finally demolished, or at least they attempted to demolish it. The house, as I remind you, as we've been over multiple times in this video, was pretty much entirely plastic. So when crews released the wrecking ball against the House of the Future, it bounced harmlessly off the side. So the crews brought out the blowtorches, which also did not work. Chainsaws, nope. Jackhammers. This is the House of the Future, baby, you gotta try harder than that. The plastic parts of the building were so strong that the half-inch steel bolts used to mount it to the foundation broke before the structure did. So instead, you had to do what Disney did to my expectations during the course of the parks panel at D23. You had to slowly chip it down over time until you were left with nothing. Okay, Happily Ever After and the Avengers ride look cool. Instead of ripping it all apart at once, you broke it down into tiny little pieces until you could cart it away for, I don't know, incineration. Now, the brand new dark ride, Adventure Through Inner Space, was open, replacing the Hall of Chemistry. And the House of the Future became an extinct Disneyland attraction. Gone were the days of walk-through attractions and museums. Now it was all about boat rides and omnimovers. Rides like It's a Small World, Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, and Ford's Magic Sky... Oh yeah, never mind. The dinosaurs were put on the railroad though, so that's gotta count for something. The land that was formerly home to the House of the Future was replaced with the Alpine Gardens because, you know, it's sort of set at the foot of the Matterhorn. It thematically made sense. And in place of the House of the Future, a brand new souvenir stand was erected called the Souvenir Stand. They could have gone a bit more creative with the name, I will admit. But remember what I said, the house was nearly indestructible, and the foundation remains in place to this very day. Painted go-away green, hidden from public view. Well, not hidden, you can still see it, but they don't want you to see it. Eventually, Alpine Gardens became King Triton's Gardens, and then that eventually, of course, became what we know today, what sits on the former plot of the House of the Future, Pixie Hollow. But not to worry, friends, if you never got to experience the House of the Future for yourself, it still exists, and by that I mean, you know, the foundation concrete, but also in tributes found all over the Disney parks. Disney even tried to reopen, reimagine the House of the Future several times at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Now this House of the Future was located still in Tomorrowland, but this time back at Innoventions/Launch Bay. Monsanto was out this time, and instead it was presented by Microsoft, HP, and Taylor Morrison. And while the House of the Future was popular when it was open, the Dream Home was slightly less so. In fact, it was pretty much empty most of the time. And while this still was a tour of a semi-futuristic house, this one had a pre-show led by Tom Morrow himself. Tom Morrow, tomorrow. They page him on the People Mover in Orlando, but you can only meet him at Disneyland. And he is definitely not just a reskinned timekeeper animatronic. Stop asking, I don't know where you would get that idea from, they look nothing alike. And sort of like the Carousel of Progress, where an animatronic family would give you a tour of their house as the years went by, this time, the Elias family would give you a tour through their home of the future. These were not animatronics though, but instead actual people, and looking around their house, yeah, it's definitely futuristic with the Microsoft Surface tablets embedded in the kitchen table, the Art Nouveau, whatever it is they were going for here. You could test out a Zune, for all those Zooners out there. Okay, but jokes aside, the kids' bedroom was actually kind of cool, because there was like a mini show inside featuring characters from Peter Pan, and Tinkerbell would fly around and interact with different objects inside the room. Is actually pretty neat. Here's an office, and I see you, Queen Mary. You're not slick. Now, the Innoventions Dream Home is sort of almost more interesting to me than the Monsanto House of the Future because it was opened so recently. It was more of a like mid-2000s view on what the future would be, and now we're here in 2022. It's weird to say that the older attraction, the Monsanto House, aged better than the newer attraction, the Dream House. And I think that might be because the House of the Future was such a far-flung, you know, mid-century modern retro future take on what a house would be. The House of the Future was more fantastical with all of these weird gadgets and gizmos, and the Dream House was just, you know, sort of 2008, here's the tech we have. You want to use it? The Monsanto House had that retro future charm. The Dream House doesn't, plainly put. And of course, the Dream House closed in 2015 alongside the rest of Innoventions to be transformed into Star Wars Launch Bay. But like I said, if you know where to look, the Monsanto House of the Future isn't quite dead. Not yet. The Howard Johnson Hotel, right across the street from Disneyland, has a retro House of the Future suite based on the old walkthrough attraction. And just by looking at these pictures, yeah, that looks awesome. It made a special appearance in the Wonderful World of Mickey Mouse cartoon, House of Tomorrow. A spiritual successor, the RCA House of Future Living, was the original post-show for Space Mountain in Orlando. Archival footage like the stuff I've been showing you for most of this video makes an appearance at the 50s Primetime Cafe over at Hollywood Studios at Disney World. And one thing that is gone now, but I thought was interesting, was a timeline at Innoventions East at Epcot before it was, you know, razed to the ground, featured the House of the Future. I think it's funny that the House of the Future was eventually reborn at Innoventions at Disneyland and referenced at Innoventions at Epcot. So although it's been gone for almost 60 years, I think it's safe to say that the Monsanto House of the Future remains in the hearts and minds of classic Disneyland fans. It's almost a park icon, even though it's been gone for such a long time. It represents the early goals of Tomorrowland, a way to inform, educate, and of course entertain people when it came to viewing this new, great, big, beautiful tomorrow that was on the horizon. Nowadays, thinking about the future tends to make everybody very sad and depressed, so we go for more fantastical futures. Futures where we fight evil Emperor Zurgs in outer space, travel through the cosmos on rocket ship missions, and drive gas-guzzling cars around in circles in the hot sun. I think the design of the house from the outside is what really makes it iconic, and it will forever be one of those staples of retro Disneyland, along with other attractions that we no longer have today, like the Skyway, like the People Mover. And while I don't think we'll ever see the House of the Future return in any capacity, it will forever be an icon of the history of a Disneyland that sought to educate and look forward to a brighter future, full of technological innovation, round white houses, and of course, lots and lots of plastic. You think I've covered Retro Tomorrowland enough? Do you think can you tell that I want it back? I mean, hi everybody, thank you so much for watching this video on the Monsanto House of the Future. I think a couple more videos are in order for the full, complete history of Retro Tomorrowland, but you know, we're getting there. We're slowly making our way through it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button, and if you're new around here and want more videos on these retro Disneyland attractions that we sorely miss, hit the subscribe button. I promise there are more on their way. Feels good to just make a Disneyland history video once in a while, you know what I mean? A big thank you to all of my supporters over at patreon.com/offhanddisney. They got to watch this video a bit earlier than the general audience. If you want to join their ranks, even just $1 a month will get you access to most of the perks, I promise. It actually is worth it. They're the ones who help keep this channel going, and again, a very heartfelt thank you from me to you, my Patreon supporters. Thank you. Same thing as always, be sure to follow me on my social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I am at Offhand Disney on all of those places, and be sure to tune in for Foolish Mortals, a new podcast it's a podcast me and my friend Disney Dan do almost every Friday over at his Twitch channel, The Submarine Canteen. Also, linked in the description down below. And I was serious about that earlier. Howard Johnson, if you want me to make a little video, I'll do it about the House of the Future suite. Thank you all so much for watching. It is now time for me to concentrate all of my powers, most of my powers, on the Halloween special coming up. I am very excited for you all to see it, which means you may or may not get a video or some sort of live stream to make up for that next week. We'll see what happens. Either way, thank you all for watching. I hope to see you all in the next video. Plastic.